My marriage is almost over, and my wife hates my guts, and she's told me she wants to file for divorce, and I will do anything and everything in my power to change it. Just tell me what to do.
Money is not evil. Money is a tool. You can kill with money. You can heal with money.
That's probably the number one thing that men specifically fear is they say, I am not good enough to provide for my children, for my partner.
I can't tell you guys how many people I've interviewed on this show that are multi-8-figure, 9-figure earners, and they're absolutely miserable. Their finances are great, or their physical is great. Look at what we've talked about, Adam, with all the people that follow the Tate brothers.
Is already the proof of concept that breaks the matrix.
And I'll tell you guys, hands down, the number one thing that every human being on earth must master, and that is
Are you really free? Do you believe in good and evil? What is the purpose of liberty and liberation in your life? And are you actually achieving it? All of these questions are the ones we're answering today with Josht Trent, the one and only expert in liberation and self-sovereignty. Welcome my co-host Adam Lane-Smith and myself, Andrey Korikov, and let's dive into this beautiful conversation we've just had with Josht Trent and get all of the details on good and evil and everything in between.
Josh, some people would say that the world is burning down right now. Some people would say that there's nothing but destruction, that there are no opportunities left. And one thing I really love about you is that you fly completely in the face of that hopeless narrative. You call people to a much, I don't want to say higher self, that's such an old term, but you call people in to be much more of an integrated, fuller self. You know what I mean? Talk to the people at home a little bit about the hope that you still see in this world. Give them a blast of hope right at the start.
look at nature for all the things that we're trying to learn and understand that in nature, forest fires, tornadoes, storms, all this stuff is totally real, and it happens in cycles that we all try to understand. But yet, if we just understood that we are nature and that we are an intelligence of nature, then chaos is always seeking order. To quote someone we all know, chaos is always seeking order. And so think about the laws of nature where there's a fire and then there's new growth that comes up. I don't necessarily welcome and invite chaos into my life, but when it comes, I think I and all of us, which we can get into today, can really use it to our advantage, can use the burning down of something to rebirth something, to renew your life and refresh yourself. And I think that's an exciting place to be and live. And it's an exciting conversation that we all get to have on the inside and on the outside.
Yeah, and I love that. But here's a question then. So most people associate chaos with fear, right? You associate chaos with excitement and opportunity. That is the most toxic trait of chaos that makes it a destructive force in our life as opposed to a constructive force in our life. So how do you stay away from being afraid of this fire, of this change, of this, destructive energy coming in? And how do you manage to stay on top of it and serve the wave of opportunity instead?
Beautiful. Okay, this morning, my friend Akshay just texted me. He's on a path right now. He's in, I believe, Antarctica, and he's going to be the first person to do the longest solo trek in Antarctica. He literally just texted me like right before this interview, and his whole piece is around being in love and understanding your fear. And that's where my learning edge in life is, Andrey, is understanding that fear is actually rational and irrational. And if I can recognize with my own internal faculty how to know what's rational and what's irrational about fear, then I really don't have anything to fear besides, to quote a president, fear itself. I can't allow myself to go into the doldrums of being completely encapsulated by fear, because then I can't move about and be free. I think fear is healthy. I think fear can be rational. I think fear is actually a good thing. And I think trying to avoid fear or trying to make fear not a part of my life, trying to avoid chaos, there's a time and a place for that. But I actually think it makes us a better man, a better human, a better parent, a better soul. So I hope that he at least touched on your question. I'm sure there's many more layers.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, so what role does fear play in the proper search for purpose and for self, like that core focus that you talk about. Because in your attachment bootcamp course, you talk specifically about a relationship with self and a relationship with principles. For me, every single time I've ever had to stand behind my principles, there was an element of fear associated with it, because that was really the question you have to answer is, am I ready to die for this? Am I ready to stand to the end? Is this my hill? And there's a first point of trepidation, of concern, of like anxiety, and you say, is this really it? And when you can overcome that fear and say, this is really it, and this is final, and this is where I will stand to the end, it gives me a sense of peace and purpose. But fear is an integral part of that experience. So what exactly is it that fear does, and what role does fear play, Adam, in the role of that process?
Well, psychologically and biologically, fear stems from the anticipation of pain that you are afraid you may not be able to overcome or survive. That's really what it is. So there's a couple layers to there. If you are anticipating pain, okay, how much of that pain? What's going to happen with that pain? Can you overcome it? Do you have the systems? Do you have the knowledge, the strength, the discipline, the sovereignty? Do you have the ability to navigate through that pain and turn it into something useful? Or at the minimum, endure it and get through it. If you do, then the fear will diminish. But it's when you feel powerless, when you feel helpless in the face of what's going to come, and then you don't know when it will stop, and you don't know if it's going to destroy you or diminish you. That's where a lot of that fear really comes. So I have found that building skills, building knowledge, building systems, all of those things are crucial to be able to overcome that fear response.
Okay, and I love that. Josh, you actually talk about 5 facets through which you can actually be affected by chaos, by fear, but through which opportunity also comes. Can you talk to us a little bit about that pentagon approach you have?
Sure. And if I can just really quickly, Adam, so profoundly put, man. I love chatting with you. And Andrey, I'm looking forward to even more richness in this conversation. I love that you said it's this biological and psychological response. I can't think of how many times I've told myself, wow, I was just acting like my father. I was just acting like my mother because of literally epigenetically how I learned these behaviors, how I learned these fears. So that was absolutely beautiful. The 5 ways that we all signed up to master as a human being in life are the foundation of our physical self. We're a soul inhabiting a body, first and foremost. I don't care what religion, what spiritual path you're on. Even if you're an atheist, we all know that we live in a body. So the physical floor is the body. The walls of the house we live in is mental and emotional intelligence, mental and emotional nourishment of that wellness portion. And then the ceiling of this home, of this pentagon, the 5 sides of self that I teach in all my programs, is the financial ways, financial mastery that we actually can nourish ourselves with. And then also, most importantly, because none of this works without this last final piece, it is the spiritual connection, a connection to a higher power in some way. So when we take this physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and financial sides of the pentagon, and we really dedicate our life to taking our time to learn it and enjoy it and actually embody, not fake it till we make it, but truly embody these 5 aspects of self, I believe we can be more resilient. I believe that we can handle, Andrey, more chaos, that we can really endure with this beautiful shell on the outside, but soft in the center when it comes to fear. I think that's the way that we can really master life, is through these 5 ways of self.
Yeah, and that really resonates with me, because the 5 sides actually are the main mechanisms through which fear enters our life, right? We have spiritual turmoil, really that search for purpose and meaning, which you work with, Adam, extensively. We have the financial side, and everybody is scared of not being able to provide for their family. That is probably the number one thing that men specifically fear, is they say, I am not good enough to provide for my children, for my partner, for those that rely on me. I'm scared of being sick, as we should all be, right? I'm scared of all these things, and they do fall into categories neatly. Now, is there a center point, do you think, Josh, that allows you to be strong in all of those 5 areas? What's that core skill that will allow you to build that house that you have to base your life on?
Everything in the pentagon is held together by liberation. If we are not liberated from the fears that hold us back from filling those sides of self, we can never be free. I can't tell you guys how many people I've interviewed on this show that are multi 8-figure, 9-figure earners, and they're absolutely miserable. So I think the glue that holds every single piece of the wall together is a commitment and a real understanding of what liberation is. I don't know what the Webster's definition is, but I define liberation as the ability to say no to anything that doesn't serve my soul. That's liberation. So if I have true liberation, then I can say no to anything that intuitively, in my own deepest faculty, doesn't resonate with who I am as a human being, as an expression of Josh. Then I'm liberated. And that liberation is the glue, the foundation of all of these pieces of self. Many people get stuck, Andrey and Adam, in like one side of it, where their finances are great or their physical is great. Look at the CrossFit community. You know, it's filled. Look at what we've talked about, Adam, with all the people that follow the Tate brothers, right? So there's many ways that I think human beings, human souls get convoluted and wrapped up in just a myopic view of one side of the pentagon, when really what we're talking about here is a more integral approach. It's integrating all of these 5 sides into ourselves so that in the center, there's no bullshit. We're actually embodied in these ways, and we're honest about the ways in which we're not embodied. That's liberation, because liberation is also being truthful about where you are in your developmental process.
I'd love to pick your brain on this, because people ask me all the time, you know, Adam, how do I find out who I am? How do I go find who I am? Who am I? What am I supposed to be doing? And I tell them it comes down to 2 key factors. Yeah. That's why I built the Attachment Bootcamp course, to cover these 2 factors. First, number 1 is your core principles, right? The honor code you follow, the philosophy you follow, the religion you follow, whatever it might be, your core deciding factors, right? When something happens, how will I conduct myself? My sense of right and wrong. And the research sadly shows that only about 10% of the population really has that core internal, this is right, this is wrong, I will do what is truly right. About 90% of people are driven by that fear and by that confusion. And at minimum, at best, I should say, they are saying, I will do what others have defined as right so that nothing bad happens to me, or so other people will think I am good. That 10% have those principles. The second piece of this is your long-term goals. It could be the legacy you're creating, right? Twitter parlance is mission, the mission you are on, but your long-term purpose that you are crafting, whatever you are guiding toward, and the way that you will conduct yourself along that pathway, that is who you are. So it sounds like to me, and here's where I really want to get your thoughts, those are the 2 key elements to me that speak to who a person is. And if they're truly liberated, they are able to follow those 2 key things in every circumstance. Do you agree with that? Is there 2? Is there additionals? What do you think there?
I love the 2. I would love to add a third, just to play advocate for, multiple realities here. I don't know if y'all talk about psychedelics on the show or not, Andrey. I don't know if that's something that y'all get into, but there is other realms. There's other realms than just the 3D realm we play in. I'm not here to wax poetic or get super esoteric with y'all, but I would add a third, and I would say that there are many things that we inherit both in utero, epigenetically, and I get almost interstitially from our past, where the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Like, that's an old adage that we've heard, right? And so I would stack a third on top of that, Adam. Now, the 2 that you have could be standalone in a life's work of their own. It's not to take away from your 2. It's just to add potentially a third, and that is have an understanding of how your emotional epigenetics impacts who you are and how you show up. Because a lot of times, if you look at the work specifically of Mark Wolin, who's the author of It Didn't Start With You, he's the president of the Family Constellations Institute. He talks about in his work, and we really are starting to understand just the scratching of the surface of how we carry on trauma response and how we carry on the way that we behave with others, that yes, definitely, Adam, applies to attachment and applies to the deep work that you do, but also applies to how we even came into this world and how we were formed during the stress time of our mother in utero, and how she was stressed by our grandparents and our great-great. These are all things that I think both psychology and science are just barely starting to wrap their head around, that are super exciting for us. There's one specific study, just lastly here, that I'll mention, and it was in a university in Africa, and they stressed out the male rat, the male rodent, almost to death, I believe, in this study. And I'll send you guys the link so we can really have the science on this. And they checked the hormonal response, the fear response, 4 generations forward from that father who was stressed. And that father, by the way, had mated with non-stressed out females. And the same physiological response, the same cortisol response showed up in that 4th generation rat, even though that rat had not been stressed out. Now, that is science and spirituality telling us that we are epigenetically a byproduct of the lineage that came before us. And I think that weaves into the other 2, Adam, that you're talking about. This is a really fascinating thing for me, the emotional epigenetics of who we are, how we show up in the world. It's freaking freaking fascinating.
I love this so much. People don't realize how much of your attachment is derived not only from the behaviors you experience, but then also understanding how to surround yourself with the proper environment so that you can manage these factors like this. Because it's not just I am an existing entity who has no connection with anybody else. You then connect with other people. You then create environments. You then foster situations which can be harmful or nurturing and conducive to your genetics and to your attachment. It is not simply, this is where I am and I will always be stuck here. It is, this is who I am and this is what I require, and I will foster this and build this and nurture this, even with other people.
So I want to pitch an idea to you guys. And there's also, the famous saying that with great power comes great responsibility. I would suggest an adjustment. That with great freedom comes great responsibility. And this is actually an area where having freedom, the liberation you're talking about, Josh, actually means great responsibility, because liberation may be misunderstood by many that you're going into some form of I will do anything I want, I have no responsibility to anybody, and this is a completely false notion. It is a false notion based on the science of attachment, that you're actually going to be damaging or impacting positively or negatively all of your relationships past, but now we're talking about future, right? We're saying that what you choose to do with your life is going to impact your children, 4, 5, 6, how many other generations forward. So you actually do not have a right necessarily to go and create those damaging relationships going forward, not just in your present, not just in your past. So there's this idea of a huge amount of responsibility. And again, we all know where that conversation comes from. So that's something I really do enjoy. And the conversations are on responsibility, but that is something that is needing to be defined. What is your view on responsibility as also the center point of this liberation idea?
Wow. We're getting deep right off the bat. I really love this. So when I think about responsibility, I used to feel that responsibility was my enemy. There was a time in my life, especially early in my 30s, before I started the podcast, before I took hold of my own sovereignty, before I actually started valuing myself and learning how to love myself, I had such an internal war about rejection of responsibility. And that metastasized into aggressive pornography use, unconscious sex with women, and just really partying, drinking, all the trappings that are just waiting for us with bated breath of society to fill the bottomless hole in our souls. I was there. And so responsibility is a really interesting word for me now, because I'm a father of 2. I'm a partner, soon to be husband. I'm a homeowner. I'm an entrepreneur. I pay the staff. I have all this responsibility, Andrey, all this responsibility. But if you would have asked me 10 years ago, could I handle it all? I think my honest answer would have been no, because I didn't have the spiritual or the life experience to understand what the that even was. So I think we really have to start at the definition, right? The definition of concern, or the definition of resistance to responsibility, for me, is really like a manufactured definition. Look at manufactured. It's something that's produced at large scale, or it's of evidence of a story, right? Manufactured concerns of evidence of a story. So I have a story about responsibility, that responsibility is bad. And I say that in bunny ears for people that are listening on audio. Responsibility is to be avoided. I say no. I say bring as much responsibility into my life as I can, because the more I can care for others and the more I can pay others and take care of others, the more response-able I am as a man. Now, there's many facets to that as well, because that's just the outside trappings or the evidence of that responsibility. The internal locus of control that I must develop in order to be a responsible man, a truly responsible father, a responsible business owner, a responsible human being, there has to be a complete dismissal and a burning down of the old stories of what I thought responsibility was. There has to be a reassociation to my nervous system through conscious breath work. There has to be a turning down of the default mode network in my brain. How can I get more blood to my PFC in times of stress? How can I train my nervous system, my mind, my heart, and my soul to be able to run towards responsibility, and to be able to know when I'm at my edge, and to be vulnerable and honest with my woman, with my staff, with my guests, with you guys, about what responsible edge can I push into to quote David Data, without falling off the edge? Can I be at my edge as a man? But can I be honest and vulnerable with myself and others when I'm at my edge, knowing that if I push through that edge with ego, that all I'm going to do is let myself down and others? It's a multi-nuanced definition and explanation of responsibility, but I think it comes just through maturity. And by the way, I haven't mastered it yet, y'all. It's not something that I have a firm, no, I don't have a firm, complete totality grasp on it, but I feel like through life experience and through spiritual maturation and through, just like I said, nervous system work, internal work, a lot of the work that Adam does in attachment and understanding who we are as a person, all of these things amalgamate into us being a true hero for our story. And the story that we get to write is, it's okay if things burn down. It's okay if I have responsibilities. I welcome these things because they make me a better human being, a better man.
I love that. The embracing of what could happen because you have the knowledge, the skills, the systems, the strength, even the experience to tell you that you can move through them and build something out of it instead, that you will survive. That's why the fear can diminish, because you have those pieces in place so that you will survive no matter what happens. That's beautiful. That's exactly how it needs to roll.
Sure, but that's also a mechanism that gets to turn on, and that is the mechanism that tells you that you must live. Like, that is your resilience, that is your longevity, that is your ability to fight. And that's something that is innate, I believe, in every man. I assume it's also innate in every woman. It just works a little bit differently. And that desire to survive, to overcome, to persevere, to achieve is an integral part of the first step to liberation. The first step to responsibility is to say, I can. Now, we're talking epigenetics, right? Is this something that is passed on to us through generations? Is this something that's learned? And can it be something that's taken away from us? Because I've seen a lot of young people coming in, especially kind of 25 and under, they seem to be missing that essential desire for life. They're just consuming life, one scroll at a time. And as soon as they are faced with an obstacle or they're faced with a challenge, they just give up. I've seen so many young people just give up at the slightest challenge or the slightest confrontation or an obstacle. What happened? Where does this desire for life, this desire for accomplishment come from, the drive, and why do we lose it?
Here's, in a nutshell, what I believe you're saying, and I see it firsthand, by the way. I've seen it firsthand, not just in my local community in Austin, but with a lot of the people that comment on our YouTube and that comment on the Wellness and Wisdom podcast. Like you said, Andrey, there is this air of giving up, and it's very palpable. And I believe it is fueled by a few different things. I think the major fuel source has been, actually, to quote your earlier question, a lack of responsibility by the technocrat companies that are the ones creating programs based on limbic system addiction for these children. And those children grow up to be teenagers, young adults, who are literally wired to their devices. That is one key point. There's a lack of responsibility and a lack of honesty with the Metas, the Instagrams, specifically TikTok, which is owned by a Chinese communist country, right? Maybe people don't know that. So we have to check in with our soul here on a collective level. Is progress for progress' sake good? No, it's not. Is progress for the growth and the goodness of humanity good that can be quantified and measured and that there's a collective yes on? Yes, that's great. I think the other factor that we're dealing with is parents are so financially disempowered, which is why in my Pentagon teaching, that financial piece is so powerful. And I'm sure you gentlemen have both felt this, right? Being leaders of a business, being a father, like, in order to have sovereignty, you must have a roof that is built from financial intelligence. I think so many people, I don't know the data on this, maybe you guys do, so many parents are so stressed and so just shackled with the responsibility and the disempowerment of jobs they hate and doing things that they cannot stand. And their children see them do that. Children learn by example, not what is always spoken by word. And so I think those are two really big factors. If I had to say a third, I would say that it's a severing of spirit. It's a severing of our connection to a higher power. It doesn't have to be Christianity. It doesn't have to be Islam. It doesn't have to be Judaism. It could be just some connection to the fact that we are here and we are created by a creator. Therefore, we are here. Otherwise, we would not be here if we had not been created. So I think it's interesting, these three aspects. I love the rule of thirds. I love teaching in the rule of thirds. Those three pieces need a sussing out. They need a look in the mirror, and they need a real inventory of how we're just lacking so deeply in those three areas. I think that's where it all begins, Andrey.
I really like this idea that change must be systemic. You have to tackle multiple factors at once to create actual, lasting, impactful change. So my background is actually in organizational change, process engineering, business consulting, and we would go into these large corporations, would implement technology, would implement AI, would implement these massive solutions, and we learned through practice that if you change one thing at a time, the system will correct itself. If you change two things at a time, the system will correct itself. But three factors onward, the change becomes so profound and it's become so complicated that it must enter into a state of chaos so that it can then restructure yourself. Right? And the same thing applies to human beings. The same thing applies to everything. The stuff you teach, Adam, is also three-pronged, right? Is your relationships to self, your significant others, and to your social circle and family, right? Everything seems to be connected around this idea of trinities. Religious connection, absolutely. I believe it. That's my particular understanding. I see the same thing apply in many other teachings, in spiritual teachings, in practices, in anything, is really this connection of three parts, right? Exactly. Body, soul, spirit, and your mind, all of these things seem to come together in some form of a three. Now, I do want to talk about the financial side of things. We didn't really touch on the financial much on our podcast yet, but it is a fascinating aspect that we definitely need to touch on. And that is to say, right now, financials are actually a huge component of the ability to build relationships. Why? Because that is a resource. In order for us to spend time with each other, Adam, you know this, we build a friendship and a relationship on financials. Like, we have to generate financial success so we can share this time together, so we can have the opportunity to work together, to do things together. In order for, say, my girlfriend to stay home and help me, take care of my child, then I need to be able to provide for her. In order for me to be able to communicate with my friends, to go see them, to do things together, I have to have these resources that are disposable. One thing that has happened is we have lost all disposable resources. So many people in the States and in the Western world are living paycheck to paycheck. They have no freedom, they have no mobility, and they have no ability to help or influence anybody in any part of their life, and their trust in themselves and the trust that their children have in them, the dependents have in them, is lost. Because when they need help, your child needs help, you can't help them. And you go through these experiences a few times, that will break you. If you go through them for a lifetime, that will destroy you. So I agree with you, Josh. The financial component is exceptionally important, and that's also why there is such a great burst in the creator economy, which I absolutely love and adore, and I think it's the best thing ever, and I'm really on that train, that allows people to free themselves and allows them to start generating value that is not tied to a large company, that is not tied to a large organization, to a technology company, to even manufacturing. It actually gives us value as humans. And guys, having talked about the creator economy and it being such a big driver of what we are doing now and how we're actually spreading information and helping people become liberated, I want to talk about today's sponsor, the Veritas Creator Academy. And this is an academy where I myself come in and I help creators like Adam and many others learn how to be content creators in this economy so they can help other people become liberated, so they can become liberated themselves and really understand and make money on the core thing they're trying to change in the world. So if you want to learn how to be a content creator, if you actually want to learn how to make money and become a big part of this economy, if you want to become successful and you actually want to make a difference, and then come learn with us at the Veritas Creator Academy, and then we can help you get there and build that creator dream you've always wanted. Visit veritascreative.media and let me help you more.
Listen, I got to jump in here.
Do it.
I got to jump in there. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You inspired me so much, and I know, Adam, you're going to speak on those three things too, because I could feel your energy rise up.
I can see him. I can see
when
him
I was
floating.
talking about that. Yeah, I know. But just Andrey, to share on what you said. Oh my God, what you said when you talked about the financial stress. The metaphor would be just a drop of water on your shoulder, 24/7, 365, that is always reminding and informing your nervous system that you are not free, that you are not safe, that you must fight flight, free, or fawn. Like, it's a big one. I would say, and I've heard Joe Rogan talk about this. I believe, Adam, we even explored this. The financial piece is so incredibly important. And really what that does is it points a finger on the entire financial system itself. And then you start having an open mind because of your seeking of liberation to Bitcoin, to alternative coins, to being sovereign with investing, to understanding that financial intelligence has nothing to do with what your grandparents and your mother and father told you about money. Money is not evil. Money is a tool. You can kill with money. You can heal with money. Just like a hammer, you can build a house. You can kill somebody. Money is the same thing. Money is a vehicle for energy transmission. It's not spiritual all the time unless you make it. I think everything is spiritual, so money for me is spiritual. So if you want to be spiritually free, you cannot and you must not reject the financial freedom, the financial sovereignty. They are intermingled. They are brother and sister. It's such a big piece. I would say that most people say that they don't have enough time and they don't have enough money. And that is a story that keeps you stuck and disempowered and unconsciously collecting evidence that you are not free. And until a human being wants to be free and wants to be liberated and truly sovereign, they cannot do that without really exploring their own stories about what money means and about their own self-harm, essentially, by feeding themselves stories about what money truly is.
I'm going to take all of this and rather than refute or even dive into the three that you guys have built, what I will say is there's a fourth. And the fourth element, I think, is why people are giving up. People do not have a working model for what they could do instead of what they are experiencing right now. I think for the last 100 years, the system has broken in every capacity, everywhere, for everyone, so that new generations now have no functioning working models for much of anything. So what they have, many of them, is the broken models and then no alternative. So that's that learned helplessness that we talk about. There's been experiments where they take dogs, and this is a horrible experiment, but this was before ethics, before we invented ethics, in science at least. They took dogs and two different groups of dogs, and they put them in cages, and they administered an electric shock at various times. Now, one group of dogs had an electric shock when there was a preconditioned set thing that would happen. If the dog touched that point over there on the cage, a shock would go off. The dogs learned very quickly what was causing it. They simply avoided that. And then when the experiment was over, the experimenters opened the door, the dogs walked out. They were happy, no harm done, nothing wrong. They just walked out. Their life went on. The other group of dogs were issued shocks completely at random. Completely. Nothing was ever the same. It was always a completely different process for it. And what they found was that eventually the dogs, they'd start running around frantically trying to figure out what to do, but eventually they would wear down and they would simply lay on the floor of the cage and be shocked over and over and over. They would twitch when they'd get shocked, but they would just give up because they had no mechanism for stopping the pain. And then when the experimenters would open the cage, the dogs actually wouldn't even leave the cage. The dogs had given up so much that they simply stayed lying on the floor of the cage, this learned helplessness. I think that's where a lot of us in modern society have found ourselves. And obviously the pathway out is finding understanding, finding explanations, whether that's through Bitcoin, through personal sovereignty, through finance, making different connections. But we need new knowledge of, is it possible for us to stop the pain we are experiencing? And I think that's the fourth element that most people today, frankly, are missing.
Yeah, and that's actually why I really like creators like Josh so much. And, Josh is cool and all that, but the concept of a Josh existing, like the fact that you exist and you are thriving and you can be here to talk about these things is already the proof of concept that breaks the matrix. Like it is the proof of concept that this type of life is possible. And it's interesting too. So for example, I'm in the space, you're in the space, and I talk to my grandmother who grew up in the Soviet Union, lived in the Soviet Union her whole life, and an entirely different set of values, very interesting. And I try to tell her what I do. And to her, it is an impossible circumstance. It is such a break.
Sure.
Right? It is such a break of concept, especially because, social systems, religious systems, financial systems are so different. To her, she doesn't understand. She can't understand. I am concerned that on one side, yes, a lot of these technocratic companies are starting to create another version of that. Another version of that very closed off, very restrictive, very organized society. But on the other side, I also know that empowers us to build a completely different reality. We're seeing a split of the world, a creation of truly a chaotic entity because we have a black and a white. it's already giving birth to many movements. Red pill being a great example. That was the concept of red pills, that you're supposed to break the matrix. Like the MGTOW movements that are happening right now that people are starting to fall for, I believe for the wrong reasons, but people are trying to act out and they're trying to orient themselves in this chaos.
The financial situation in this world is getting worse. If you feel like you are lying on the floor financially, trying to find a way forward, the creator economy is a great answer to this. This is what answered the call for me when I had to step forward and take care of my 5 children and my wife, was to become a creator. But I couldn't do it on my own. I needed people to teach me. That's why I connected with the Veritas Creator Academy, to show me exactly how to turn my passion into a business where I could care for my family. If you out there have an idea right now and you want to be a creator and you want to build a business and you want to feed your family and feed yourself and build something meaningful in this world, check out the Veritas Creator Academy. They will help you grow as they have helped me.
Now, Josh, we have your model for orientation yourself, for orienting yourself towards liberation. What role does the concept of goodness, let's even delve into the religious, the spiritual significance of goodness. How do you orient yourself in making the decisions about what is good for your soul?
That's a beautiful ledge, and on that ledge stands 2 things. The first is my objective experience, and the second is my subjective. Because good or goodness is really in the eye of the beholder, whether it's individual or collective. So whether it's a society or a community or a city or a state, there's been an amalgamation of decisions that have been made that bring forth what is good and what is not. So it's a philosophical question you're asking.
Absolutely.
It's also a practical question too. I mean, there's a lot weaved in there. And so goodness, I believe, would be something that would produce a result that is more loving, that is more caring, that is more kind. I think that's how we could quantify goodness, right? Would you gentlemen agree about that?
That's very abstract. From a science perspective, Adam, what are the quantifications, maybe biochemically, of love, kindness, goodness, all of these things that Josh has listed?
Sure. Yeah, we've got plenty of chemicals we can measure with that. Oxytocin is the hormone released when we feel loved, right? Feeling of love and feeling for affection. When you have oxytocin, you will then give affection to others. One major problem with people who have more sociopathic tendencies, they tend to be incredibly low on oxytocin, so they therefore have very little capacity to love or feel connection with other people. We also have serotonin that we can really start measuring, and this is something that we've looked at with psychology. We've tried to just treat it like the depression mechanism, but it's much more than that. It's long-term fulfillment. And when we're lost with serotonin, and when we're high on cortisol especially, and we're binging dopamine, the dopamine coping itself becomes our mechanism for reducing the cortisol, because the cortisol prevents us from going into the oxytocin, getting the GABA, which is going to reduce the cortisol. We don't spiral up, we spiral down. Dopamine is the final coping mechanism for that. And that's by and large what we're seeing in our society right now, is an endless stream of dopamine coping. So that we can.
So is this the final step? Like, there's nothing below this. Like, if we break this cycle and we burn this system out,
there's things below this, but it gets bad from there.
Oh,
when you really spiral down, and there's no more dopamine to cope with, when the Netflix shuts down, when the internet gets turned off, when there's not all the junk food and the sugar and things in the world to try to cope with, when you were to revert to endless pain and no dopamine to try to manage it. Either people start laying down on the floor of the cage like the dog and they start giving up, self-harm, self-ending, all the kinds of things that people do, or they become angry and they become violent and they tend to burn the system down, as we've seen in numerous revolutions throughout history. You find a way to end the pain.
It's really interesting because I lived through that when I was a small child. I was born in Russia at the in the last year or two of the Soviet Union, and then I was raised in the chaos that ensued, and I specifically remember that when the dopamine stopped and the food ran out and everything kind of fell down, there was a number of people that just lay flat on the floor, and there were crazy amounts of homeless people, and they were educated. These were professors, teachers who would be digging through garbage just to find food, and the crime just shot up. The amount of violence that happened was just absolutely insane. And then society went into the swing for 10, 15 years until it started trying to come back to some form of order and value. And in some ways, I'm seeing a lot of the same tendencies happen here at a much different level, of course, in a very different way. But But this desire to take the step past dopamine, like what next, is kind of almost present. And that actually makes me want to ask you guys, we talked about goodness, and I like the fact that there's now a biochemical explanation to goodness. But now let's talk about the flip coin of that. And that is the idea of evil, like the idea of bad, of destructive, of these things that are violent, or things that make you want to give up on life. Josh, do you believe in evil? Do you believe maybe in a religious form in the devil as you believe in the higher power? Is there such a thing?
Well, the answer is yes. And it actually stems back to my initial answer when you asked about goodness. And I love, by the way, Adam, I love your downstream serotonin, dopamine. So it's almost like the clues that lead us back to the why and the what. It's so beautiful because neuroscience can show us a lot of things about how we're showing up, but how do we actually behavior change? How do we use neuroscience to change our behaviors to even understand, Andrey, what is goodness? What is evil? How do I want to orient myself around being good or evil? And by the way, evil would not exist without good and vice versa. So really what I'm sharing with you gentlemen and with all of us is it's about understanding myself. What are the parts of myself that are evil, that are asking for understanding, that are asking for light, or I guess you could say discovery, right? Because to deny that evil exists is a very, very, it's not just illogical, it's stupid. To deny that evil exists is stupid.
It certainly wants you to do that. It most certainly will benefit from being unknown.
Yes. Well, look at how many things that have gone on in censorship in the past 2 years, especially since the whole lockdown theater of Schmovid, right? When Schmovid happened and when the lockdown started to happen, we all got a beautiful gift. But we had to choose to orient ourselves around, is this evil or is this good? And the answer was both, because usually the answer is. It was evil. It did come from an emanation of evil. But the good is that we were able to see evil for evil's self. So really, we became at a higher vantage point of what was actually occurring, and there was a natural bifurcation. And this is actually the take home to your question, because it's such a really important question for our time. The bifurcation is, just like you spoke about in Russia, there are going to be professors with multiple PhDs that laid down on the floor when the food went out. There are going to be mothers that just gave up and their children are screaming around them. It's because they either grew up with some kind of combination of choice-making faculty that came online to be good or came online to be defeated by the evil that was around them. I think goodness has to have evil to play out in the theater of life. Just like evil has to have good. It's the same thing. It's all God experiencing God's self, really. If you break it down to God being no thing and everything at the same time, and all three of us and everybody here with us on the podcast is a unique point of consciousness expressed in human form that was created by a single source, right? A single source creation, node. Then really what we're talking about here is we're all in a big theater. And evil must exist. It has to exist unless we have all achieved collective nirvana, which I don't think, if I check my clock, is happening anytime soon. I think we are here in theater for a reason, and that theater is playing out, and it's really up to us, you guys, and for all of us, it's up to us to orient. Do I understand the evil in myself? Do I understand the goodness in myself? And which one do I pay attention to, and do I grow and put fuel and nourishment into? And there's really not a clear answer for that. Yes, energy flows where energy goes, but it's not that simple. It's not like we can just love ourselves on a Tuesday by flicking a switch. We can't just all of a sudden orient to good from evil by listening to one podcast, but we can do it over time. We can become a subject of our environment by being open-hearted and being in virtue of wanting to serve others. Yes, we can do that. But my main point is it takes time, and I think we have to understand these parts of ourself before we can ever intelligently answer that question truthfully and honestly.
And I really like that answer because it actually does highlight the relationship between the two. You know, if you follow biblical stories, then it all began when somebody decided to eat some fruit, right? And then we got all this power of knowledge, and knowledge, unfortunately, means the knowledge of good and evil. They come together, and that was when, you know, this iteration of our reality, you know, our Big Bang, you know, if you're talking spiritually, happened with a consumption of the apple, of knowledge of good and evil, right? That was the beginning of our universe. We don't really know what happened before that. We don't really know what happened after. You know, all of this, of course, is philosophical theory theological, but the concept is that for us, the universe has always been binary. It is always going to be binary in this iteration of our spiritual life. We don't really know what comes after. We will all find out soon enough. But, in the process, yes, I agree that life is a theater and we are all playing its parts, and there is a bigger meaning and a bigger purpose to it. Adam, what is your view on good and evil? Is this something that can be touched, quantified? You've quantified good. Now, how are you going to quantify evil for me? No pressure.
So my earliest work as a psychotherapist, I worked with inmates who had committed multiple murders. I worked with people who had mutilated children. I worked with people that had killed and killed and killed and kept killing and would blame the people that they had killed and say they shouldn't have got in my way, sort of thing. I've worked extensively with people that we would classify as some of the most evil people on the planet. I've worked extensively with those people and understood them. And I will say this is evil in its truest sense. Evil is the belief that you are justified in destroying somebody else for your own convenience. That's really what is evil, right?
So is it an egoism? Is it a narcissism? Is it pride?
It is pride. And all of that wraps up together. It is the pride that you are worth, your convenience is worth more than somebody else's being, than their essence. It's not a survival thing, not necessarily, right? We could talk about people and rationalize survival, and that's, we could say, okay, well, you did this, but it was for survival. It's at least understandable, but convenience.
Okay. Is it like a transgression of another person's liberty, potentially?
Potentially, but again, it even comes down to the question of why. It's not a survival thing, it's a convenience thing.
An intent?
For my feelings, for my emotions, for my sense of self, for the convenience of having pride and feeling that I deserve this, I am going to take this from you. That itself does seem to be the essence of evil.
So this is an interesting overlap, and I love the concept of the yin and yang symbol. There's the black and the white, but there's also the line. People then realize there's actually a line between them, even though it may be minuscule, where those 2 points touch and they coexist. And I fully believe that is the line where we humans exist, with the whole concept being God and the universe, right? It exists in everything, but for us, we live on that line of the balance of good and evil. So what role does this idea of pride play in liberation, Josh? Because here's the thing, you liberate yourself, but what do you liberate yourself from is a core question. And how do you make sure that by liberating yourself and taking control, you do not step into this prideful territory, which is dangerous and where evil lives?
Wow. So there's duality in your question, because I think pride of home, pride of job, pride can actually be goodness, and pride can be evil. So to unpack that, I guess the best way to do it would be to describe exactly what we're all talking about here. I'm not a religious man per se, but I definitely believe that pride is a killer for people in and out of religions when they don't have a relationship with a healthy source of pride. And by the way, they were never modeled that healthy source of pride as well, because one of my mentors that's deceased that I would love to podcast with, I'm sure you guys would love to podcast with him. His name is Alan Watts. If I could podcast with any deceased mentor, it would be Alan Watts. I mean, this guy is incredible. And he studied many religions. And one quote that comes up for me time and time again that touches exactly on your question, Andrey, it's Isaiah 45:7 from the King James Version in the Bible. And it was written, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. I mean, it gives me chills just to say that. There's many Christians in the world that don't want to look at that passage because they say, oh, the devil is bad and God is good. Well, what if it's all God? What if it's all God? What if pride has two sides, just like good has evil and evil has good? I think that having pride is a beautiful thing, but I think when pride becomes vanity and narcissism, and, you know, there's many stories in Greek mythology about Narcissus who looks in the lake and sees the reflection, and it creates this chasm of terribleness in life. We learn by metaphor, we learn by story, we learn by unconscious language, by neurolinguistic programming. We learn the best when we hear something that sticks to our soul. And when I hear Isaiah 45:7, that I form the light and create darkness, spoken from, you know, interpreted by the men that were alive at that time. And one could say that these terms have been changed over time, but the essence of what is being shared in Isaiah 45:7, and the essence of your question is really, how can we liberate ourselves from the narcissism and the vanity aspects that are self-serving and selfish, and take from others to produce our own pride and our own egoism with our boasted breast hanging out in the light? And how do we understand that part of ourselves so we can give it whatever it needs so it can settle? We can be prideful in ways that are actually healthy and that serve others. I'm prideful about my yard. I'm prideful about my home. I'm prideful about my education of my children. I'm prideful about the way that I treat my woman in public. Those are things to be really, really revered as far as pride. And so I think it's this center point, Andrey, to understand, how does pride actually work for me in life? And how can I mature myself, to be honest with myself, to take a real inventory of myself so that pride doesn't work against me and pride doesn't harm others?
I liked what you said in there specifically, that pride doesn't become vanity. I think a bit about the English language. Yeah. And Andrey, you've handed this to me quite a few times. The English language, we have so few words for some of these concepts. We have the word pride, but then we say take pride in your work, take pride in your family, take pride in this. Pride and vanity. Definitely. That is a massive distinction that we definitely need to make. The vanity of, I deserve this, therefore I will take it from you. Therefore I am better than you. Therefore I will usurp this that is not mine. Very much so, that vanity. And again, it circles back to often those brain chemicals. It circles back to, I have high cortisol, therefore I will take this dopamine from you. I will gather dopamine from you at your expense. Right, which really is the core essence of, for example, like sexual assault and things like this. I have low oxytocin, therefore I don't even understand the emotional experience of being bonded. Therefore, I will take dopamine where I wish, which is often cheating on your partner, because you don't even understand the experience of how they will be hurt biochemically by it. You don't even feel that. So you'll simply give them a bunch of dopamine in return and make them feel better later on. It's fine. I'll give them chocolates, flowers, compliments. It'll make up for it. It'll be fine. It is really a lacking the biochemistry of understanding what you are even taking from somebody else, and your biochemistry therefore justifying, I am stressed out, therefore this is what I'm about to do to you.
Okay. And this idea of changing biochemistry is now tied very closely to the idea of changing the thought process and, most importantly, the narratives by which you live by. So, Josh, when somebody comes into your community, which I believe you're launching very soon, I think April 29th you mentioned, there's a new community that you're launching. There's multiple wellness programs. There's things like Breathwork. How do you take somebody who's truly lost in all aspects of your Pentagon, and you start helping them take the first steps into their new liberated self? How does that work?
The beautiful place, the only place to start, is right below your nose. Because we all do it, no matter what stories we've created, no matter what traumas we've been through, no matter what hardships we've endured, everyone inhales and exhales. And that is the only involuntary and voluntary autonomic process we have for our nervous system. I mean, Adam's touched so beautifully on the neurology and the psychology of what happens in the body with goodness and with evil. I will tell you guys, it's written on my arm in Italian. Se posso respirare, posso scegliere. And what that means is, if I can breathe, I can choose. If I can learn to train my nervous system through my nose and mouth with my breath holds, moving cerebral spinal fluid through my 4 diaphragms, that is the entry point to everything we ever need to access. You cannot have a healthy mind unless you have a healthy nervous system to congregate with that mind. It's just not possible. They work hand in hand. So if I have some dysregulation in my nervous system and I'm trying to read all the books and be healthy mentally, it's not going to work. It's a top-down approach. We need bottom and top to meet in the middle. There's an author, Hawkins, and he wrote a book called Power versus Force. And I'm sure you guys have talked about this, and I quote it all the time. I don't care. Everyone gets to read this book. Power can only be trusted if it comes from peace. Force isn't trustable. Force is something to be reckoned with, but it's also something that is resented over time. When I take from anyone from force, they eventually will take that back from me from force as well, because resentment will boil over. The only way, Andrey, we can ever really begin the process when we are at the floor of our being, when we are most broken, when we are completely disempowered and not liberated, is to start with our breath, because breath is the entry point to the nervous system. Then, of course, from there, supplementation, nutrition, energy, all the things that you've explored and that we explore in our world of podcasting, right? But these are, again, top down. I'm saying bottom up. Start with your breath. Learn how to do proper diaphragmatic breathing, pranayama breathing, box breathing, circle breathing. We talk about all of this in the entry point to wellness, and that is at breathwork.io. That's the Breathe program. It's a 3-week journey that I take my students through. And from there, then we can work on the faculties of practicality, right? Then we can work on the strategies of how you move, how you eat, how you think. What is, Adam's in our store page right now with his bootcamp course. How do you relate to other beings? How does a man relate to a woman? How does a woman relate to a man? What are the things about us that we get to understand? But none of that matters. None of that matters unless we take care of the thing that is right below our nose. It's the first thing we do when we come out of our mother's womb. We inhale. It's the last thing we do when we leave the earth in physical form. We exhale. What does the space between our breath teach us about the way we're wired for life? Why are we, and why have I been wired for hypervigilance? My mother was manic bipolar. My father left at an early stage in life. I have had to learn through my pain. I have had to understand how to tend to and take care of and nourish my nervous system. And I'll tell you guys, hands down, the number one thing that every human being on earth must master, and that is their breath and their nervous system. Because bottom up meets top down. In the middle, there's peace. That's that line you were talking about in the yin yang, Andrey. In the center of all of these, dark and light, love and fear, inhale, exhale, hold, there's that peace where we're just at rest. Everyone wants it. I mean, the whole hair on my body standing up right now. We all are craving peace, because when we're at peace, we're liberated from these manufactured concerns. But we cannot be liberated from these manufactured concerns unless we develop the skills and the maturity to actually tend to our physical self and the other 4 sides of the pentagon. I think that's where you begin. And then, of course, on top of that, there's strategies and there's structure to guide somebody through their own liberation.
So I really, really like that, because it ties beautifully into your example of that dog experiment. And the foundation of the dog experiment, with some dogs giving up and just giving up on life, is that the pain will have no end, nor does it have a beginning. Right? And this is how many people actually are living their life. Their pain has no beginning because they've not been able to trace it. They've simply existed in it, especially from a young age. And it has no end because they don't understand its source. So if you're actually able to introduce the sheer concept of control to your nervous system, that it can actually start even impacting that pain in some form at its own will, you're actually giving it the ability and the hope it needs to learn and to proceed and to persevere. We do not need to fix everything that's wrong with you in this instant. We just need to prove to you that a change is possible, and that change is something that you yourself can choose to act upon. So I think that's a beautiful, beautiful concept that relates so well to what you're describing in terms of the ability to take the first step, Adam. So once you can master your nervous system, what's the next step?
I'm going to have to be careful with this one because the algorithms are going to hate this language. So bear with me as I have to use a lot of...
We'll bleep out what's necessary.
Well, I have to use a lot of euphemisms for this. So the internet...
Break the internet.
The internet's algorithms don't like it when you talk about, what do the young people say? Self-deletion, right? So I had a fantastic experience and an opportunity to be able to work with one of the leading self-deletion experts in the entire world. One of the only 3 people in the world qualified to come in with like life insurance claims and really determine, was this self-deletion, like the very carefully crafted ones designed to not leave a trace that it was self-done, but it was, right, this person was called in absolutely to make that final decision. One of the top 3 people in the world who can do this. And I will never forget our one-on-one conversations and what they told me. And it has always stuck with me. And it sounds so simple, but when you really dig into it, it means something very significant. They said self-deletion is never, ever, ever about wanting death. That's never once in all of his years of experience, his decades of experience, has he ever seen a case where a person wanted death. What the person always wanted was to make the pain end. It is always pain related, and it always comes after hopelessness that the pain will not end. Back to the dog experiments. Mm-hmm. So yes, regulating your nervous system. Yes, with the breath work. Absolutely. Learning to manage that pain. But the next step, therefore, must be learning to reduce that pain, learning to manage it properly in a way that you can at least make it mean something. If you can lean into it and it has meaning and purpose, if you can master the pain or diminish the pain or change the pain, but the way you live with it, you must gain some control over it. That comes, again, through knowledge, through skills, through systems, through mastery of it itself, but mastery of your environment. It is absolutely mandatory that a person must gain some level of control so that they can move into, arguably, being a creature who is living in pain to being a realized human being, to being truly sovereign. You are not sovereign until you at least can grapple on equal footing with that pain and have it mean something. Men who are sovereign over themselves don't just let their appearance go. They don't just let their appearance stand terribly in this world. They take care of themselves. They groom themselves. They present their best possible version into this world. That's why I am thrilled that Rugged Legacy Grooming Supplies is supplying this channel, this podcast, with their supplies, so we can bring our best to you. I recommend you check them out so that you yourself can present your best self to the world.
Ultimately, our purpose is to seek liberation, right? We're actually seeking liberation, even in the extreme cases like the ones you've described, that the only motive for that is liberation from pain. And that's the only promise we're given in life, is that our life will end and we will be free. As a spirit, as a soul, it will be free from this, whether we like it or not. So we can either choose to live that out and wait for the automated end, whatever God places upon us. We can choose to try to quit early, and it doesn't have to go down to the extremes that you've described with self-deletion. Alcohol abuse, drug abuse, violence, bad food, lack of exercise, not caring for your body will absolutely expedite that end. Or we can choose to attempt to achieve that liberation early, get a little bit of a, early sample of it, and try to imagine and assume what the next stage of our existence can be. What happens when we can achieve that liberation. That's one of the things that I really like about properly organized religion. So what I think I really like about these philosophies, like even the one that you're building, Josh, which kind of give you that sample set, and you say, well, we don't have to live here. Life doesn't have to be suffering. What next? What is the next stage? And does that not spark a curiosity? Does that not spark something in you which we're going to say, well, do I want to wait, 80 years to experience it, or do I want to start getting free now? And, touching even the question you said about Josh with psychedelics, personally, I think they're definitely very interesting and need to be touched on and explored cautiously. But they also give you a lead-in and the curiosity to say, what is there going to be that's coming? And that, to me personally, is a driver of the desire to step into life and understand what is really there under the surface. So yes, there's practical freedom, but there's also this curiosity that drives us. And I think curiosity is very much a motivator that you need to harness in your life. What do you think, Josh?
There's a concept that's been mirrored to me by many guests on the show. And I'm sure, Adam, in both academia and in your own practice, you've felt this so deeply. It's the holding of two worlds. It's being the witness. It's being the observer to all that is happening, to all that is transpiring. Yes, evil happens. Yes, good happens. They both happen. So how can I be an arbiter of truth from my subjective experience, right? Because that's important to say. Objectively, that can change over time. We used to think that slavery was okay objectively. Well, it's not. Subjectively, I understand that when I experience pain or when I experience pleasure, that it's actually guiding me towards the end destination, but it's how I orient, or it's what meaning I make of the journey as I get there. That's the quality of my life. Ever since I was a little boy, oh my God, I can remember this. This is just hitting me right now. I feel like I'm in a psychedelic journey on your podcast. I'm remembering when I was a little kid and I was like, why do these adults treat each other so shitty? Why are people so angry all the time? What is this interstitial tension that I feel all the time? What is this muck? And then when I shackled to responsibilities and when I started to understand my own self and my own life, to your earlier question about, how do I dance with responsibility? What does responsibility mean to me? Then I started to have compassion for these adults that were mirroring to me this discontent, this complete disassociation from joy, from not just hedonism, because hedonism is really a shadow aspect of joy, but really like true peace, true enjoyment, true bliss and ecstasy. Like these are all things that we can touch. But at the end of this road that you've described, there is an end point. We all will have a finite existence. We all will leave. There'll be a moment where I won't be able to hold my son or my daughter anymore, where I won't be able to eat an orange on a hilltop naked, where I won't be able to make love to Carrie Michelle. Like all of this will end. The sandcastle is going to melt. The tide's coming in at some point. So what is the meaning that we're making as we go along this journey? And first and foremost, which I actually could have said this in the very beginning, but I'll say it at the end. Can we honor the mystery of God? Can we just honor the mystery of God? We don't exactly know what God is. My connection to God has developed over the time in my life, and it's a very special connection. It's a very beautiful connection. But I don't actually know who God is. I'm developing my understanding of what God is. But to know God, you have to become a heretic. You have to be a person who's actually gone through the spiritual process of knowing God, because I think science is always trying to quantify things, and I respect science, Adam. There's nothing that I'm saying that's inherently evil about science. I think the Socratic method is beautiful. Look at how many things it's done for the world. Understanding of neurobiology and neurochemistry is incredible. But at the very end of our life, we're not going to be quoting, how much dopamine is in our system. We use it to understand and orient now, so it's valuable. But at the very, very end, we're going to want to know two things. Did I love and did I receive love? And there'll be this massive inventory in our life of how much I received love and how much I gave love. And that's all that's going to matter at the very end. And so the more we can honor the mystery of God and just give homage and peace and respect to God outside of us and inside of us, I think that's the quality of life we're all seeking. And then everything else is just a learning experience, right? When we can surrender to the mystery of God, that God is mysterious and that life is mysterious, we are liberated from having to know. It's this having to know that keeps us in bondage. And there's so much peace that comes in the not knowing, because then we can just exhale and be free.
And a lot of it is trust. Like that is the ability to trust God, in the sense that you don't have
trust
to
life.
know. Yeah, and by consequence that you don't have to know everything in order to be safe. Right? That is also the foundation of relationships. You do not have to control every aspect of your partner in order for you to be safe. Would you agree, Adam?
And you can't.
And you can't, no matter what you do.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah, the more control you try to have over people, actually, the less safe that you are.
Yeah, because it's also too much responsibility. We have a limitation on us for a reason. God did not create us with 12 arms and, a brain the size of, a dinosaur, because it is too much responsibility. Yeah. Like we were created as a balance of a limitation and opportunity. There's something that actually really jumped out at me when you're telling that, the powerful story about experience you had as a kid of why do you treat each other so bad, adults? And of course, there's so much darkness there. But even in that darkness, there's even then a spark of light. And the spark of light is that they are, by acting out, are often objecting to the darkness they're experiencing. Even in that terrible moment of an argument, when you're like completely, lost, there's this hope. You say, this isn't right. We do not want this. I'm acting out in search of help. I'm acting out in search of resentment, anger, rejection. We're saying we should not live like this. And this is actually a point of hope to a lot of people who are living with a darkness. It's not right. Use that power and harness that to build something else. Because at least when you don't know what to do, in your depth of your soul that this isn't something you should be doing. And there's a lot of hope in that. And that's where people can start with breathwork, right? Because you can at least start with something as simple as that. There's many other things that people can start because they know that just starting one thing will allow them to, over time, craft a reality where something different is possible. How long does it take to craft a new reality? How long does it take to change bad attachment? How long does it take to start pivoting towards, organizing the 5 aspects of your life? Adam?
It depends entirely on how much the person is willing to invest into that process. If they want to dip their toe in and sort of ease up to their ankle slowly over 6 months, yeah, it'll take some time. Some of the most successful clients I've ever had come to me were the ones that were in the most dire circumstances, right? I get so many guys come in and they say, Adam, I have done this and this and this, and my marriage is almost over, and my wife hates my guts, and she's told me she wants to file for divorce. She hasn't done it yet, but I'm pretty sure it's all over, and I will do anything and everything in my power to change it. Just tell me what to do. So I say, get your wife on the call. And both of them will sit down, and I will go with him through the plan of what I'm going to do. And I watch her, and as she goes from locked down and stressed, like almost like shaking with her frustration, to calming down and relaxing, and then almost like smiling by the end of that call as I'm laying out the plan he's going to follow, and he's watching her too. If he walks that plan, he can change very quickly. But it really is the tension. It's the pain. It's the fear. It's the stress. Those are the things that drive him. And when he really takes those on and says, okay, I will listen to this and follow this feedback and do what needs to be done, change can happen incredibly fast.
Yeah. And there's so much power available in the world for you to harness, only if you are able to stop believing the stories, these manufactured stories that you're telling yourself. Like, you're really your own constraint. Do you think that sounds right, Josh?
So inherently manufactured is neither good nor bad. Inherently manufactured is just is. So if someone manufactures a car, who's to say that car is good or bad? If someone manufactures a story about a relationship, well, then your results are going to dictate if that was, I guess, good or bad. But a lot of this is very philosophical and subjective, because good and bad are terms that the man of mind tries to place upon things that sometimes, or maybe a lot of times, we just don't understand. So I think really the question, the deepness of this question is, if something is manufactured, can it work for me or can it work against me? And the answer is yes to both. So it's really about this one super important fact that I think we've touched on a lot in our conversation today. It's really, where am I placing my mental, my emotional, and just the energy of my being? What area am I placing the attention on? And do I just simply like the story that's being created? Do I like the results of that story? I'm here to tell y'all, we're in a theater. We're in a game. Money is a game. Relationships are a game. All of these things are a game. They don't feel like they're a game, though, which is why, Adam, you're so good at what you do. It's why you serve so many people, because our nervous system misinforms us. Our unconscious mind misinforms us based on the patterns that it was infused by from parental caregivers. And we also talked about epigenetically and intergenerationally. So if we're this amalgam of things and we come to this choice point of manufacturing a story, because they're all manufactured. We all create them, just like the Federal Reserve creates money. They manufacture it out of nothing. So we manufacture these stories. The only way we can quantify if that story is loving or good or harmful or evil is by the results of that story. Do I love my wife? Do I love my husband? Do I love my life? Do I enjoy my children? Do I love what I do for work? Do I love my life? Do I love what I'm doing with my life? And if the answer is no to that, then this is a beautiful place for you to just create a new story. No, it's not that simple. Just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. There's ways and there's tools and there's mentors and there's guides to help you create a new story. Because if everybody could just create a story that was new, that was more self-serving, than more loving, then we would just all do it, right? So just because something is simple does not mean that it's always going to be easy to execute. I think that manufactured consent is a novel for a reason. I think that manufactured concern is a statement for a reason. I also think that manufactured joy and manufactured relationship can be really good things, because really manufactured is just evidence of a story. It's just evidence of a story. So can I go out in my world as any human being on this planet? And can I search for the evidence that I'm loved, that I'm supported, and that I'm free, that I'm liberated? And can I just continue to gather that evidence for my whole life, regardless of my external circumstances? And can I just continue to fortify myself with the knowledge that I am those things? Because eventually those things will come true.
And I love that. What a great way to end, guys. This was a fantastic conversation. Self-sovereignty, right? That really has to start with you, and it can start at any point, even if it starts with controlling your next couple of breaths. Right, go check out Josh's breathing courses, and Josh will have you list them all again. Check out his work. Check out Adam's work. Like, take a look at the small steps you can take in order to start changing that narrative right now and creating a new manufactured story, but one that is manufactured by you and not for you, and in a way that's actually intrinsically true to what you are as a person and to your actual value. So I love this, guys. What a great conversation. Josh, where can people find this amazing help that you're offering them?
Well, I have manufactured a few things, and they came from my heart and they came from my creation. I think manufactured, by the way, is really just an afterthought of creation, which maybe that's for a whole nother podcast. So I've created a few things that people can begin their journey of liberating themselves. And by the way, I'm not on a mountain. I'm not wearing a white cape. I'm not fully 100% liberated in nirvana, highest frequency on the Hawkins scale. I'm not that guy. But I do believe that as a father, as a successful business owner, as a successful podcaster, that I do believe I can guide people in their white belt, brown belt, even gray belt category, right? It doesn't not take a black belt to teach white belts. And so if you find yourself, Andrey, you mentioned earlier, at the bottom of the barrel, when they're just, their whole life is falling apart, go to breathwork.io. That's where you can get involved in our 3-week course about breathing. And it's really a 3-week journey, right? It's just understanding, how do you breathe? How can it really allow you to clear your stress for a lifetime? How can you use your breath as an ally? Go to liberatedlife.me for the Liberated Life Tribe. That's where we are in mastery as a community of people that are just soul seekers who want to master these 5 ways of self and nourish these 5 ways of self. And then lastly, which I'm really excited for you guys to come into Austin on, and that is the Wellness and Wisdom podcast. That you can just go to joshtrent.com/podcast for that.
Amazing. All of those are linked below, and we'll definitely look forward to that next conversation. It'll be so cool. Adam, where do people find you?
I am Adam Lane Smith, the attachment specialist. You can find everything on my website, adamlanesmith.com. You will find my various coaching packages where I can walk you through this process and get you to the life you want to live. If you are in pain, it means that there is a state where there is no pain, and I can help you reach that state and build you the relationships you're really looking for.
I love it. And if you want to check out some of my work, go to veritascreative.media and see what we do with building content creators like Adam. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Andrey Korikov, and send me a DM if there's anything you guys want to work together on and have any cool ideas. So, Josh, Adam, fantastic conversation. Thank you very much for coming on to I Wish You Knew. I definitely wish I knew this earlier, and I cannot wait to delve into your work, Josh, and to keep building this stuff together, Adam. So thank you all. Like, share, subscribe, comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your questions about this so we can get them answered together in our next conversation. And we'll see you on the next one, guys.